Welcome to The Chair. I'm your host, Ramona Wright, and I'm really excited about the lovely ladies I'm going to be speaking to today. To my left, I have Laurel Mintz. She is the CEO of Elevate My Brand. Hello, Lauren.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. To her left, I have Ms. Jaunique Sealey, the Chief Inspiration Officer of RegroupNation.com. What's up, Janique?
Hey, Ramona.
And to my far left, I have Ms. Rachel D. Wilson, CEO, founder of Lady Rebranded. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Ramona.
And to my right, last but not least, I have Medina Stanulis. She is the founder and CEO of Follow the Sun. Thanks so much for being here, Erica.
Hey, Ramona. Thank you.
Yeah. And Erica, I think you've probably come the longest or farthest
Yes.
from Mexico?
Yes, from
Okay.
Puerto Escondido.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being here. And, the ladies are going to be really brave today. We're all going to be sharing personal stories about how we each have pivoted or changed careers, either following our passions personally, professionally, or maybe there's some sort of service opportunity that we all care about. But we're basically going to keep it real and give you the authentic truth of our journey and our experience. But before we do that, I also want to let you know that this is an opportunity for you to get out your pens, get out some paper, get out your phones, and get prepared to take some notes, because we're also going to be sharing words of wisdom, some tools and resources that might empower you to take a leap of faith and start your journey towards pursuing your passion. So, I wanted to start off this conversation with a quote. I love quotes, and I'm sure all of you probably have quotes that you live by, but there's a really great quote that you may be familiar with that says, "There are no secrets to success. It is the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure." This is a quote from Colin Powell. And as many of you might know, he's a retired 4-star general in our Army, the U.S. Army. He's the first African-American appointed as the U.S. Secretary of State, and also the first and so far only to serve on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I started out with his quote because I'd like to say that what we're all doing definitely takes all of those things, right? It takes hard work. It takes learning from our failures, but it also takes courage. And I think sometimes we may believe that courage is the absence of fear, but I like to really define it as the commitment of moving through whatever we're going through and overcoming it, committed to overcoming it. And part of my journey of starting The Chair was being courageous and following a passion of mine. Many of you might remember what I did back in the day, and my career was in strategic communications, public relations. So I used to prepare people to do what I'm doing. So it's really unique for me to be in front of the camera now. But I didn't realize that what I'm doing now, it was something that I had a passion for as a teenager, but also an experience that I had working for a television production company, or actually a studio that was in our public high school. So a lot of times we don't realize that our experiences in our youth, and even the dreams that we have, like what do we want to be when we grow up, they're somewhere buried deep inside of us, and there's an opportunity for us to act on those dreams. And so I've had the opportunity to do that by launching the show, being courageous, but it hasn't been easy. I also have had the opportunity of pursuing another passion of mine, which is coaching and counseling people through my wellness think tank called the Center of Leadership, Love, and Relationships. And I'm talking a little bit about this before we get started because I want to use myself as a really great example. I came from a single mom. I worked a traditional job. But for those who know me, I have Jamaican roots. So I've always had side hustles, but I finally took the leap of faith about 2 years ago to do my own thing. And I didn't realize until preparing for this interview that I'm living my dream. One of my dreams as a teenager was to be a Christian psychologist. And I grew up in a really religious household, very spiritual. But I always found myself in these advisory capacities. I was a peer counselor in high school. I was a resident advisor in college, consultant. I also taught at Loyola Marymount University. And so here I am today, having the show, having you all on, but also coaching people towards more wellness and balance. So I say that to say that so few people get a chance to do what we're all doing. There was a study of about 2,000 people that was recently shared on Mashable, and only 22% of those 2,000 people actually pursued their passion. So that meant that 80% of folks are working a job that they can't stand every day. And how many of you can relate? I was one of those people for many years. But I thought we'd start there in really talking about maybe each of you and your journey, thinking back to when you all were little girls and thinking about what you wanted to be when you grew up. And if your path has somehow maybe made that come to fruition in some way. And Janique, I wanted to start with you because I think out of everyone, you have probably one of the most unique and amazing career paths of really anyone. And I say that with, respect to all of our panelists, but your story is a little non-traditional. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you wanted to be when you grew up and fast forward to where you are now.
That's okay. So to make a very long story short, when I was young, I wanted to be
younger.
Well, when I was really a wee little ladette, I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to be an astronaut, and I wanted to be a singer, and I wanted to be a lot of different things. I was really into exploring my interests, and I eventually settled on being absolutely certain I was going to be a doctor. And I carried that all the way through to college. And I was an engineering major, and I realized I really do not like actually being an engineer. I love the thought process. I love the science. I love the empirical study, but I don't love I don't love being pigeonholed. So I decided I would go to law school. That was going to give me more options. I didn't know. I mean, but I constantly pursued what my heart was telling me. I was just always listening. And when I got to law school, I veered off track. And I had an offer to join a law firm and do the traditional thing. And I sort of looked 30 years down the road and said, I know what this life looks like. I want to live a life that is constantly unfolding. I need some adventure. I want to go on an adventure. So I veered off that track and wound up, I decided I wanted to follow my heart into entertainment. That was a very rocky road, which we can all, we'll all talk about our various paths. It was uncertain. There were missteps, there were failures, there were crashing, horrible, complete fallouts of what I thought was going to happen that ultimately, with perseverance, transitioned into one thing after the next. So to fast forward, I did wind up in entertainment. I was an executive at Universal Music for 4 years, doing exactly what I wanted to do. I literally envisioned my job, and it unfolded. I left there when my heart wasn't singing anymore, and wound up working for Lady Gaga during the Born This Way era. Left there, started my own company, got hired by Prince, and wound up working with him. That was an incredible opportunity. That was also something I've manifested.
Wow.
He was the one, for entertainment, the mind that I wanted to know. And I had that wonderful, amazing opportunity to work with him and be mentored by him. And then I found a wonderful business mentor who I've been working with for the past 4 years on incredible adventures. I ran a company, and now I'm working with him building an incredible company. It's an incredible experience. So I have changed careers, changed paths multiple times, but I've always tried to follow my heart. And it hasn't always been directly to the exact tune of what I thought in the moment, but it's leading and continually evolving as fulfillment.
And I think that gut trust, that following your heart, one of the things that I'm constantly encouraging so many folks who I coach is listen to your gut. It knows. I like to say it's like a lighthouse. You know, there's somebody up there that can see what we can't see, and our eyes are the shoreline. And I think many times we don't often follow that opportunity to manifest what's in our heart. And I think that probably, Laurel, you can relate to that as well, because I know that you've manifested some really extraordinary things. I know that your company is going through a growth spurt.
We are, yes.
And both of you are, I heard the term recovering lawyers.
Reformed, recovering.
Reformed, recovering.
Whatever. We're on the other side.
But maybe you can share when you were, a child or a teenager, what did you vision for your life, and have you manifested that, or maybe did other experiences inform what you are doing now?
Well, when I was little, I actually always thought I wanted to be a lawyer. That was when someone would ask me at 5 or anyone else in the room, and they would say, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a doctor. I was like, I want to be a lawyer, because my dad was an international businessman and would travel all over the place. And I remember him coming home and telling us the story about this amazing, stunning, gorgeous couple who were international attorneys. And I remember this so vividly as a child at 5. And so that was what I would tell people. I wanted to be a lawyer. And they're like, oh, crap, look out for this kid. So I did. I did the same thing. I went to undergrad at UCSB. Then I did a JD and an M.B.A. actually at Rutgers on the East Coast. I worked at a corporate law firm in San Francisco called Huffington and Burling, and found out my dad actually had stage 4 cancer. So that really derailed the process. I moved back to LA, took over his business, ran that for about 3 years. He survived, which is an incredible story into itself. But in terms of manifesting what I thought I wanted, I think I thought I wanted something, and then I realized that that was actually not what I wanted, because the idea of being a lawyer and the actual practice of being a lawyer are very, very different, as we know, right? So now I run an agency. It's been almost a decade. As you said, we're going through an amazing growth spurt, moving into a space that's 3 times the space we have currently. And as I was sharing earlier, like half the time I want to throw up, and the other half the time I want to celebrate and scream from the rooftops how happy and excited I am about my business. But that's kind of what I've manifested in my journey of getting there.
I love what you said, that, once you got what you wanted, you weren't sure if you wanted it. And I often say that sometimes you don't know what you want until you get what you want. And then you're like, I don't really want that. But sometimes you have to get it. And I think that's why it's so important to encourage all of you who are listening, take that leap of faith, try it. The worst that can happen is you don't like it, or you don't want to do it, or you find out it's maybe more than you could handle. And that's okay. And the other thing is, too, you don't have to do it alone. And we're going to talk a little bit later about squads. Everybody talks about squad goals. And so I want us all to be thinking about people who've been in our corner, who've helped us get to where we are today. So I want to go over to Rachel. You do a lot of work with women.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you, when you were a child, thought that you would be working in a space primarily empowering women in business, or did you happen to fall into what you're doing now with Lady Rebranded?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was little, I always wanted to be a teacher. So I was the only child, and I would line up my stuffed animals, and I had a green chalkboard. I don't even think people even know what a real chalkboard looks like anymore, but I used to teach from that. Yeah, and it was just so exciting for me. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher, but I never saw myself in a classroom. So I couldn't define what that was, even at a young age. And I was a part of Girl Scouts, and I just loved, hanging out with girls. But interestingly enough, I was actually bullied as a kid, and I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like I was different. And I think it was out of that passion of really wanting to garner some support and some friendships around women that my passion for really bringing women together and doing some powerful things around that was birthed, So I think my whole life's work was based off of something that I saw was missing and in my space, and I wanted to create that opportunity. Well, little did I know that that's what entrepreneurship is. You see a need in the market space, you see where you can create value, and you do that. And so I think I kind of fell into it. Essentially, but I am doing what I love to do, which is I help people to really discover and tap into who they are, what their purpose is, and what their value is in the world. And I do that through the marketplace, particularly with women. So I'm teaching, I'm coaching, and I'm helping people to really tap into something that I believe will help them to live better, more full lives.
And I do want to point out that we have a beauty queen in the room too. So, I wasn't going to let you off the hook. Can you talk a little bit about, that journey just a little bit, what that was like, and maybe just share with the audience your pageant background?
Yeah, so it's not much of a background, to be honest. I remember getting an email. Well, let me just go back a little bit. When I was an undergrad, I stepped onto the campus of North Carolina A&T State University. It is a historically Black college, and so proud to be an Aggie. That's what we call ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at Brooke Myatt. She's now Brooke Jones. She was my Miss A&T. And I said, who is that? Like, I want to be just like her. And at that time, we still had phones in our rooms and answer machines. Okay, a bit antiquated.
we are Zillennials. That is the term for us.
That is right. Okay. We're right on the cusp. So I remember calling her, and I remember when she called me back and left a message, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And I told my roommate, I said, do not delete this message from my answer machine. Miss A&T called me back, and I remember that was my whole goal was to be Miss North Carolina A&T State University. Well, here it is. I win Miss Sophomore, actually, and then I'm preparing for Miss A&T, and I spent my mom spent a lot of money on my campaign. You would think that we were campaigning for a presidential election. It was that serious on campus. Well, I was 64 votes away from winning Miss A&T, and it literally broke my heart. And little did I know that God had something so much bigger for me. And I remember it was 2007, and I had just gotten into graduate school, and I was like, okay, so how are we going to pay for this? And was applying to scholarships and everything. And someone sent an email to my mother and said, your daughter should apply for this. And she sent it to me. I was like, I don't do beauty pageants. I'm not walking across the stage in 6-inch heels and a bathing suit. It's not happening. But they said, no, it's a scholarship pageant, and these women are really about uplifting their community. They have a platform. You should go for it. I went for it. Competed against girls who have been competing most of their life. I end up winning. And the caveat to that was I got a chance to live a lifelong dream, which is travel to Africa. And I traveled as the guest of the president of the country at that time. Wow. And we spent 2 weeks in Gambia working with girls and partnering with them. And that opportunity came because the current or the former, at that time, Miss Black USA had gone on a trip, and the president said, well, what is this Miss Black USA? And so she said, well, we have a platform and we believe in empowering our communities. Mm-hmm. And so he said, I want to host that here so girls can see what you can do through the power of education. So it was amazing. And that's really kind of how my journey started, particularly with partnering with organizations and companies and government agencies to really empower women through leadership and economic development.
That's awesome. And what I love about your story is that you took a leap of faith.
Yeah.
You saw an opportunity and you said, you know what? Why not? Why not me? And so I think so much of the journeys that you're going to hear today from all of our ladies are about, again, these leaps of faith, these grand ideas that maybe in our heads we might have the little negative self-talk that says, you can't do that. But I am really inspired by all of you because you all are showing us that, hey, I'm going to take a risk. I might be afraid, but I'm going to be courageous and see where it takes me. And it took you, obviously, to a place you always wanted to go as a kid. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, last but not least, Miss Erica, I'd love to ask you the same question, but I also want to say that part of my inspiration for doing this conversation about pivoting and career change was fueled by you. We met probably about 4 months ago now, wow. In February at a really great conference called the Heart Series for companies and for people who want to impact the world through social good. And you were on a panel talking about your story, and I think you mentioned, and I hope I don't butcher this, but I think you mentioned that you took an internship very, very late in your career and decided to do that because you thought it might help you, I think, get another dream job. And so I'd love for you to maybe weave that into what you visioned for yourself as a kid and if you're doing it, because I really think that Erica's story is another great example of what it means to pivot.
Yeah. Well, when I was little, I also wanted to be a teacher, and I have distinct memories of this. You know, it sounds like you and I were playing the same thing, lining up the stuffed animals. Yeah, very distinct memories about this. For me, though, it was, I was very industrious, and as a child, and still am really. I took a lot of time to make the assignment booklets, and like really just perfected, making sure that each student had an assignment booklet. And I think that, that was probably a prelude a little bit to, going into chemical engineering and just being very curious about process and making sure, that I understood all the chemistry and all of that behind it. I've really followed my curiosity, and I think it's done me a lot of good. Ramona, you mentioned listening to your gut. And I've done that in my career. It hasn't been a traditional path. I've done a lot of operations work in the beginning. I've worked in the automotive industry, in the nutraceutical industry, biotech, tech. And all of that has led me, to the story that you were mentioning, which is I got to a place where I had reached what I would call, the creme de la creme of my career. I was in operational excellence, which is basically, being really good at optimizing processes for companies and getting rid of those inefficiencies. And essentially, I reached this point where I had worked on the biggest project that I could have worked on at that time in my career. And it kind of fell apart. I looked around and I just realized that it wasn't the place that I wanted to be. And I also looked at myself, and I wasn't I wasn't taking care of myself. I was working a lot. And that wasn't me. And coincidentally, at the same time, not coincidentally, because I was working so much, I was in a relationship that also fell apart at that time. So those character strategies that I had developed for myself to kind of get through, to push forward in your career, or to socialize as much as I could, those character strategies were kind of blown out of the water with that experience, because I couldn't really throw myself into my social life to get out of the work funk, and I couldn't throw myself into work. And that really started my transformation. I essentially, I left my job and took some time, to be, 2 weeks in the pajamas watching Hulu, binge watching for sure. And I decided to travel, and I went surfing in Morocco. I hiked to Everest Base Camp, and I surfed in Bali, and this was over 3 months. And I thought I was just going to travel and come back refreshed and get another job, the same type of job I had had. But what happened during that trip is I got so inspired to help the environment. And what I was seeing is, here I am, this, eco warrior, this, nature advocate going, and I was putting a footprint in these places that didn't really have the infrastructure to recycle the plastic, water bottles and things that I was needing to, take on that trip. So I came back a changed woman. Part of me was changed. The other part of me was like, Erica, you need to pay the bills. You need to, do the same thing you were doing. So that part of me went on an interview for the same type of job. But the other part of me was, speaking a little louder now, and really, when I got the job offer for the job I had interviewed, I couldn't take it. I was like sick to my stomach, and it just... it was basically following that authentic path that you had discovered for yourself, and realizing that you were so far down the path that you can't turn around and fake it. Like, sorry. So it was a big risk.
And then how did the internship come into that?
Yeah. So essentially, I decided that I really wanted to work more with the nonprofit sector. And what happened is that I didn't have a network that supported that. I was really starting over. So I started working for free. I actually volunteered at Taproot Foundation, working as, or volunteering as a project manager, doing pro bono work for them, and just learning the ropes of the nonprofit industry, or sector, I should say. And and really getting in touch and rebuilding like my network to be what it was that I was passionate about. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And, I think it's one of those things where we often don't think about how something like that can help us get, let's say, a dream job or help us, further our careers in some way by taking what appears to be maybe a few steps back so that we can take some steps forward. And that's a really practical tool or resource that you just offered someone, is that consider... this is where we'd love to maybe give some practical advice. Consider doing things that might seem crazy, that, your family and friends might ridicule you. But think about it. It's your life. You have to live it. And if you miss an opportunity, who's going to regret it, right? And so I know all of us don't want to live with regrets. And so maybe each of you, very much like, the practical experience you shared, maybe each one of you could just share one practical thing that you did that helped you get to where you are today by pursuing your passion. There was one thing that you had to do, or maybe didn't even know that you had to do, but ended up doing that got you to where you are. And
I can start.
Yep.
I think just being involved with women, right? That's something I think is a through line with all of us. But I didn't realize that getting involved with women's rights, empowering women, mentoring, that was something that was really important to me. And I've been so lucky to be able to weave that into the work that we do as an agency. We host events in benefit of different nonprofits. We do a lot of content around women's rights and things like that. So that's really important. But I actually have a really great tip for people who are trying to figure out what they want. Can I offer that?
Please, yeah, absolutely.
So we do this with our clients. So this is a really great, very practical, hands-on tool. We call it red light, green light. So if you go through an entire week and you write down every single thing that you do throughout that week, just like look back at your calendar and write it all down on a piece of paper. And with a red pen or highlighter, highlight all the things that you just hated doing, that just drained the life out of you. And then highlight all the things in green that really empowered you and gave you energy. And anything in the middle is yellow, right? And that's totally negotiable. But anything in red is a very clear vision of what you don't want to be doing with your life. And anything in green are the things that you should really be pursuing in terms of developing that next iteration of who you are in the world.
That's an awesome tip. And I think sometimes we don't realize the power of writing down things, processing things and releasing them. One of the ways that we do that is by writing them down. And you can release all of these ideas. You can release a lot of stress and tension that you've been feeling. And then you can really see, wow, this is why I've been so frustrated and upset. I'm spending most of my time doing something I don't want to do. Yeah. Janique, any stories to share?
I do. So it's all part of the same period of events, but it had to do with writing something down. But I was, in my dream job, I thought my first bona fide major label entertainment job, which was what I'd set out to do, was exactly what I set out to do. And then I was there, and I'd done a lot of interesting things, and I got to a point where I literally felt like I was dying. I don't know how else to explain it. I just felt like I feel like I'm dying. Like something has to change. And I started writing down, and I just published a book, Regroup, which I didn't talk about. I've written 4 books. My 4th I just published, Regroup, The How To of Never Giving Up. And in the book I talk about the importance of writing things down. And I started listening to what was really bothering me, or what I really felt like I needed. And I really felt like I needed freedom. And I just kept writing, God, please grant me the freedom of my time and geography. I wrote it over and over and over
Affirmations.
Again. Oh, I wrote it over and over. I mean, notebooks filled with it. And it was the one thing I could tie into. I didn't have words for exactly what I wanted to be different. I just knew that. So that's what I focused on. And that led to a decision that I decided I'm going to take the first job that I get. I'm leaving this job. And whatever the first job I get, I'm taking it. That was just a decision. So I interviewed. I was interviewing. And it got to the point where I was at the very tail end getting a job similar to the job I was going to leave. And something told me send an email to one of your contacts. It was Lady Gaga's manager. I said, hey, I'm leaving Universal. We had other conversations about working together in the past. I was like, hey, by the way, I'm leaving. I'm leaving no matter what, just letting you know. And he was like, well, let's go to breakfast this weekend. This is like a Friday. So I was okay, fine. So Sunday we meet for breakfast. And he's like, so, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm interviewing for these, it's like associate general counsel roles. And I did not want to be a lawyer anymore. I wanted to be, I wanted to craft messaging, and to move into marketing, digital strategy.
And just for clarity, the person you met with, they were someone that you worked with within
No, we
Universal?
had done a panel.
Okay.
About 5 or 6 years before, and we stayed in touch.
Got it. So just to, maybe give an example to our audience, you tapped your network, someone outside of your network, you met with them, and then they asked you what you're interested in doing.
They said, what are you doing? And so for me, it was a wild leap to even think of myself as a marketer in a sense, because I knew what I wanted to do and what I was great at doing.
Sure.
But I didn't feel the confidence to actually voice it at the time. And this was over 10 years ago now. But so he said, okay, well, what do you want to do? And in that moment, I had to decide, was I going to speak my truth or was I going to stay safe in what I felt confident in saying? I felt confident in saying, I can be a general counsel or associate general counsel. I didn't feel confident in saying my truth, what my heart really wanted, which is I want to craft messaging. I want to be a strategist. I want to work in marketing. I believe that I can do this very effectively for brands. So ultimately, I went with the courage. I found the courage to say, I want to run a digital agency. I want to craft messaging for brands and companies and help them translate their benefits to an audience and develop their audience. He said, that's so funny. I'm launching an agency. I need someone to run it. You're the perfect fit.
Wow.
Can you start on Monday? Basically. But can you start in 2 weeks? So I was like, yes. So that was my first job offer that I got on Monday. So this was Sunday morning. On Monday, I got a call with an offer for the same path that I would have, stayed on that I wanted to leave. So it was that leap of faith.
Yep.
And finding the courage to voice my truth that changed the entire trajectory of my life. And from that point, I've been a marketer for over 10 years now. I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do, different iterations of it along the way, but it started with that leap of faith.
Thank you for sharing that story. And there's so many things that you said that I just want to unpack and highlight. I think first and foremost is asking for what you want. We often are not encouraged to ask for what we want and to ask for what we need because, like you said, you didn't feel like maybe there was a little bit of worthiness. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I can't really do this. And this is not a political show, but I will just say that our current president has shown us that you don't really have to have on-the-job experience to pursue a position that you might feel you're qualified for, right?
No comment.
And so, it's just one of those things. And I just tell everyone, Donald Trump, whether you hate him or love him, the one thing that I appreciate about him is he believes in himself. When nobody else believes in him, when he might look foolish, when people will say he's crazy, he is going to do Donald. And so that's one thing that I want all of us to take away with is as long as you're not doing surgery on someone and going to impact someone's life, go for it, whatever it is. So I think, kudos to you for speaking your truth and stepping up and saying something. One other practical tool that I often coach people around career counseling and career coaching is send out an email to your close network, whether it's your alumni network, whether it's friends, family, and tell people what you want to do. Just like that man asked you, there might not be someone who's going to ask you, what do you want to do? You have to tell people, right? What do they say? A closed mouth doesn't get fed. And so by sending out an email, just highlight 3 things. I'm interested in X, Y, Z. And be honest, I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm passionate. I believe I have a gift maybe that you felt you had a gift of marketing, but you didn't have the experience. And put yourself out there. All someone can say is yes or no. And the more bread you put out there, the more opportunities there are for something to bite. And maybe, Rachel, do you have a quick story, a quick example that you'd like to share as well?
Yeah, absolutely. one thing that I really I practice daily is the power of imagination. Right. So I am a creator. I'm always coming up with a new way to do something, a more efficient way to do something, a more interesting way to engage people. So what I do is I spend about 30 minutes at least daily living in a world or creating a world that I actually want to live in. And I say, if money was not an issue, if it was not an object of concern, or if I could be anywhere in the world, where would I be? And I literally take myself there. I'll go there. So it's interesting because I got to Africa because I imagined myself there when I was a little girl reading Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters. And I saw myself as wanting to marry this amazing African prince, and I could always see that vision. And then I remember landing in Gambia, and tears were streaming because I was like, this is what I saw. This is my vision. And so I use that practice daily, and everything that I have ever manifested or been able to accomplish has literally lived inside of my mind first. Yeah. And sometimes it's almost jolting because I'll look around and I say, this is what I've dreamed of. Like, this is what I've been able to create. So if there was anything I could share with people, is to really take the time to utilize your imagination, because it truly is a gift and it works. Whatever you're able to create, you're able to manifest. The room that we're sitting in, somebody had to think of it first. Somebody had to dream it up. Absolutely. And I remember hearing something where someone asked me, who's waiting on you to dream? Right. And I remember writing that question down, and it was on like a second trip to Africa. And I just cried and I cried. And I thought about all the girls that I wanted to impact through education and leadership and economic empowerment, and all the women that I wanted to empower, to do amazing things. And so I said, well, if they're waiting on me to dream, why am I waiting to dream? Yeah. And so I decided to move forward with creating the world that I wanted to live in.
That is beautiful. And what I think people don't often realize is that dreams are free. They're free. Yeah. They don't cost you anything to act on oftentimes. Yeah. That, like you said, everything starts with a thought, then a word, then an action. And so I think dreaming, we often believe that I can never make my dreams come true, but all of you have talked about manifestation. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. And it might sound like, oh, hocus pocus or woo woo, and oh, good for you. You guys are the lucky ones. But, we started out with a quote with Colin Powell. He came from an immigrant family. Yeah. Very little resources and opportunity. And when you think about some of the most amazing success stories, whether it's Richard Branson, whether it's a Queen Latifah or a Magic Johnson, many of these folks didn't come from families of wealth or influence. But the one thing that they all did was they had courage, they took a leap of faith, and whatever they dreamt of, they said, let me try it. So I think that's fantastic. With the little time that we have left, I want to talk about, before we open it up for questions, we've talked about how we've gotten to where we are, some tools and resources that we've enacted and that we've shared with folks. But I'd like to talk about the not so good times. What has happened on the journey that maybe could have derailed you from following your passion? And maybe just share one obstacle, or either one sacrifice that you had to make in order to get to where you are today. And I'll just start really quickly with my own journey. 3 years ago, I knew that I was going to make this career transition from having my own agency and having multiple income streams. I was teaching at Loyola Marymount University. I even had a full-time gig. So again, as a Jamaican, I have tree jobs all the time. And my mom, she always encouraged me. She said, have multiple streams of income. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You can get laid off. And I did. I got laid off. And so I remember that I wanted to downgrade my lifestyle and upgrade my hustle, which is a quote from my brother Voltaire. And one of the ways that I did that is I got rid of my car because I was spending way too much for a car that I wasn't even using because I was traveling. And so that was a major sacrifice that I made so that I could take those resources and invest in my own dream until we get sponsors. And we'd love to have this show sponsored, anyone who's watching. I'm my own sponsor. I believe in this. And so I decided to make a major sacrifice and put my money where my mouth was, pun intended. So, Erica, maybe we could start with you and maybe share maybe one obstacle that you went through, and also maybe just add one person that helped you through that obstacle?
That's a good question. Just one?
Just one. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for.
Well, I'll just keep it general. You're going to run into obstacles. When you kind of get in tune with your, I call it the authentic path, your purposeful path, you're going to run into, into situations that want to almost like, throw you off course. And the best thing you can do during those situations is just really feel into it, not try and resist it or push through or block it. Mm-hmm. Because I think that once you feel that and you let that process through your system, you open up and you allow flow to happen. And you get really good at what I call, practicing equanimity, right? So I shared with you about a time where, it was extremely difficult for me to kind of start over again. But if I hadn't had that moment in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today. Mm. And so all those obstacles, all those things that happen in your path are happening because they're part of the journey. Yeah. And as soon as you learn to kind of appreciate, both the good and the bad, you start enjoying the path and the journey a lot more. Now, this is a practice, right? We all get ups and downs about that. But just learn to flow. Learn to flow. That's my biggest advice.
Mm-hmm. Following the flow, follow the sun.
Yes, it is all about finding flow, my friend.
Yes. Maybe if each of you, again, want to share one story of either an obstacle or a sacrifice, or maybe also someone who just helped you through a difficult time.
Sure. So I think for me, realizing that my path that I thought was towards the corner office of partner track at a big law firm was not actually who I was and what I actually needed to do. Mm-hmm. I mentioned earlier that my dad got sick and I had to run his business. And there I was at 26 with a staff of 60 in retail. And I was like, what the hell am I doing here? This is just ridiculous. I had total imposter syndrome. I had no idea what I was doing other than the fact that I had this education and maybe a year of being an attorney under my belt. And when he stepped back in, because I was so lucky he survived and I stepped away, I started going after those big firm jobs again. And like you said, being just totally viscerally nauseous when you got that offer, right? And so I think my biggest issue was getting over that little voice in the back of my head saying, but you're a lawyer. That's what you need to do. You need to go, you did all this education, follow that. And I said, you know what? Those offers are going to be there. I'm going to figure out what I really want to be doing. And I opened myself up to flow and the work started coming. And that was almost 10 years ago that we've been now at an agency. So I think getting over those little voices in your head
the negative self-talk.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And in terms of someone that helped me along the way, I've been very lucky to develop a great advisory board, and it's a tip I would offer anyone who's watching or listening. Find 4 to 6 people who have value in a different way that you do, and actually try and formalize a board of advisors. Now, it's different than a board of directors, as you guys all know, because of the legalities, but make sure that you are tapping into people who have either built what you want to build faster and stronger and better than you have so that they can pull you up by their bootstraps. That would be my biggest piece of advice and what helped me create my agency.
Yeah, it's that squad.
Absolutely.
Right? Everybody needs to have their squad. Yeah. And if you don't have a squad, don't be afraid to identify online mentors. Someone who I really admire, who I've yet to meet, is Lisa Nichols, who is a very dynamic, not only motivational speaker, but she's a part of my squad. I go online, I take courses from her. And so there's a lot of people that are out there that you can learn from, even if you don't have physical access to them. And also don't be afraid to introduce yourself to people, because there's a lot of people who'd want to help. People love to talk about themselves and share knowledge. So I really appreciate that tip. That's so valuable. Janique?
Well, I tell several of these stories in my book. And my whole book is about those moments that go wrong and you have to regroup and find your path in the lowest point. And I remember when I first stepped off of the traditional path of being a lawyer, I didn't take an offer. I had an offer for a traditional job, great salary and everything, and decided to go to a startup. The startup lasted for basically 1 year. That position lasted for 1 year, and then funding ran out, which happens often with startups, and I was just facing an unknown about what do I do next. And I thought I had ruined my life, honestly. I was like, oh my God, I gave up my traditional path, my, this great job. And I was fortunate enough to get an offer, and I'll wind up a partner in 10 years if I had just stuck with it. And here I am. So I decided that I was going to buckle down, take a job where I could work as many hours as I could, save a bunch of money, and I just moved to California, just with no job, but with a vision. I moved 3 days before the bar exam, took the bar exam, and kind of the rest is history in a sense. But that was the sacrifice. I really, really hustled and became my own sponsor. And I think, basic kind of echoing what you were saying, anytime you're making a big move in life, effectively you do become your own sponsor.
You do.
And you set yourself up, and you're your first believer, and you're your first funder, and you're your first sponsor. And you just have to put yourself in position to do that. And also, who helped me, I think the other thing that you should absolutely do is find a mentor. Just find the best person you can, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. But in every step of my life, the mentors that I've had, and I've been fortunate to have my dad as a mentor, my mother's a mentor for me, but I've met mentors in life, and as soon as I met them and identified them, I said, you know what, you're stuck with me. And that's just been the case. So that's been pivotal for me.
That's excellent. And I love that you were sharing about mentoring. And oftentimes, I think we often feel we have to identify someone who's much older than us, maybe much more established. But I would consider each of you mentors to me. Laurel, I know we just met, but just learning more about your background, I would love to, have each of you mentor me in some capacity and vice versa. And so I think that, again, we have people all around us who are our peers that can hold us accountable, which is really important. We need to always have somebody that we can share our dreams with that will hold us accountable to pursue them. So mentorship is key.
Call me anytime, sister.
I'm going to be calling you too.
Absolutely.
And Rachel, what about you? I know that you and I actually share probably, a very, very challenging past experience that fueled us. But I'll let you share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I would say that a huge shift for me really started about 4 years ago when I found myself homeless, sharing a mat in a room with a 12-year-old girl in Nairobi, with a master's degree, with experience, with a formal crown on my head. And I said, how did I get here? And it was a shifting moment for me because I realized that I had put so much value in what I did that I forgot to focus on who I wanted to become, right? And so I think that was really a seed that began to birth Lady Rebranded and our whole Be Brand Do methodology. And so throughout that time, I said, what am I going to do? I felt like a failure. I had said, I prayed about this and, I believe I'm supposed to just pick up everything and leave. I had a great job, was making amazing money, had great influence. And I abandoned all of that essentially to venture out to Nairobi to work with startups and help to empower local entrepreneurs to build amazing things. And it didn't work out the way that I thought. And I, called my mom just in tears, like, what did I do? And so embarrassed to come back. I moved to New York and hid for 6 months, because I was so embarrassed. And then throughout those 4 years, it ends up with me losing my mother unexpectedly and sharing 23 days with her in the hospital as she was in an induced coma, trying to figure out what am I going to do,
right?
As a 31-year-old woman. And just never imagined that these type of tragedies could happen in such a small span of time. So it really pushed me to the edge, to say, what am I really going to focus my life on? And everyone talks to us about being a good steward over our finances and over our resources, but very few people talk about being a good steward over the breath that we take.
Yes, that's
And,
so powerful.
my mom's, her last breaths were very labored for 23 days of her life. And I said, it is a gift for me to be able to take in this breath and release it and be able to live. And so what am I going to do with the breath that I have in my body? And I decided that I was going to fully jump out and become an entrepreneur no matter the circumstances or sacrifices. And so you want to talk about sacrifice, and I'll make this quick, but a huge sacrifice is honestly finances. I came from a single parent household.
Same here.
Right? I didn't have a lot of money. And even when my mom passed, there wasn't a whole lot of money that was left over for me, and that is something that is so important to me, is to build generational wealth for all women, and I wanted to shift that, particularly for women of color as well, because we don't see that very often. So how can we begin to integrate that? So that was something that I focused on, and that's why I started this company. That's why I want to empower women to build disruptive brands, not only to impact culture and shift culture, but to also build generational wealth, right? So that their daughters and their sons could continue to build on a strong legacy. So it's a sacrifice. There are times, honestly, as an entrepreneur, where I'm like, okay, we're going to have beans and rice today.
Yep.
And for the next 3 weeks, but it's fine. It's like, it's a sacrifice that you make. And I know that I'm doing something that I am called to do, and I'm creating value. So the revenue will follow, the opportunities will follow, and it's happening, but you have to just stick it out sometimes. And you have to know that you have it. You have that grit, you have that resilience, you have that drive. And if you're willing to commit to the process, and if you trust who you are and what you're called to do, then everything else will fall in line, right?
That is true.
And I think we've seen that. Everyone who has stepped out on faith, spoken their truth, asked for what they want, within a very short period of time, the resources were made available to them.
Yeah.
We have time for, I just want to make sure that we do ask some questions from the Facebook Live feed. And so I'm going to ask each of you one question from Facebook. And the great thing about these questions is there's some great how-tos in regards to information that you all can share. So, Laurel, the question that someone had is, with your JD, M.B.A, and your background with your education, how have you tapped into that from an alumni network standpoint? And maybe is there a word of wisdom or advice that you can give for people leveraging where they go to school to help them on whatever their passion or journey is?
Definitely. Well, it was very challenging for me because I went and did that JD MBA on the East Coast where I had no network. I don't know if you guys don't know me that well, but everyone always said when I was living in LA that I had a very East Coast energy and I needed to go out there and see if that was for me. Turns out they had snow out there, which was not my favorite thing. So I came back fairly quickly. But it's amazing how across the country, especially as the internet became more and more prolific and social media became more prolific, how much easier it was to tap into those networks. And every university has those alumni networks. So I don't know if I've done the best job of doing it, but I've certainly put myself out there. I think the best way that I have done it is through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is absolutely the best platform to do that from a business perspective. And I've had so many random prospects reach out to me, both employees and potential clients reach out through that network.
That is fantastic. Wonderful. And Janique, someone said with your book, Regroup, the how-to of never giving up. And also, if you guys haven't seen the cover, this is the lovely cover of the book. Someone said if there was at least one takeaway that you want readers to glean from, what would it be?
I would say that failure is not fatal. And I call my book A Recipe for Resilience, and it's the best thing that I know so far. I put it in that book. And I feel I want people to realize that every path of following your dreams, every path to greatness, it contains setbacks. It contains failures, just like Colin Powell's quote. It's so true.
Yep.
A quote from a great man, and failure is part of the formula and the equation, and it's about what you do at that moment. And so it was important for me to write that book and let people know that failure is part of the process.
Yep.
And this is the way to make it past this point. And if you make a habit of moving past your setbacks, you will be unstoppable and you will reach whatever goal you set for yourself.
That's beautiful. Yeah, faith is about exercising that muscle, you know, and how can we exercise it if there isn't an obstacle to overcome?
Yeah.
Rachel, someone asked, can you talk about the Be Brand Do method around Lady Rebranded? I know that that's a proprietary offering that you have. And maybe even, I think they sort of weaved in, I'm trying to understand their question a little bit, like personal branding.
Yeah.
Because I noticed, I think you're wearing your brand colors.
I am.
As am I, for your company. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Be Brand Do is really about being able to connect to your why, right? Any successful brand is very clear on what their mission is. and they're very clear on how they want to get there. And I think our society has conditioned us to perform. Everything is performance-based, right? And particularly for women, like we wear so many different hats and there's so many things that are going on. It's like, what do you do? You know, I'm out to change the question when you go to a networking event. What do you do? I literally cringe, you know, because
especially here in LA.
Especially here in LA. It's like, what do you do? I'm like, well, hi, my name is Rachel. Right. You know, because I think people put so much pressure on what do you do, because then they assess whether or not you're valuable enough to continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
And so I'm on a mission to shift that. And I say that because most people start with, what do you do first? And then it's like, this is what I do. This is what my brand is. And then this is who I want to become. But that's backwards, right? Focus on who you want to become. I want to be empathetic. I want to be a leader. I want to be excellent. I want to do amazing things. I want to become, right? Then I can shape my brand or my story. And then from there, the do is easy, right? Yeah. Because sometimes your do changes, like how you execute your vision and who you want to be, it shifts. So if you focus everything on what you do, when that shifts, then you shift. And you're left asking yourself on a mat in Nairobi, Kenya, who am I, right? And what is my value that I bring to the world? But if I know that I'm still a leader, whether I have a title behind my name or if I'm just traveling to Bali to find myself, to find a new part of myself, I still bring value. When I step to the table, when I come into that boardroom, I'm enough, just as Rachel D. Wilson, right?
That I'm enough. Yes.
I'm enough. And so that's super important. And that's what Be Brand Do really is about. So that's what makes our company a bit more unique than just a normal branding agency, is that we really tap into, we want women to be empowered, right? And then we want their businesses to succeed. And so we believe that there's a strong correlation between that. When you know who you are and what your value is and what you bring to the marketplace, then you can build a disruptive brand.
That's awesome. Thank you. That is so powerful. And it's hard to sometimes feel like we're enough. The last question, Erica, that we received ties into a question that I wanted to ask you. And the question is, what is your dream? And I wanted to ask, I think it complements that, is how did you become passionate about what it is you're doing now? And maybe you could answer those questions and share what you're doing as well.
Yeah, so I launched Follow the Sun, and essentially the mission is to reconnect people with nature for the purpose of finding flow. And flow is really the response to change. So we move from rigid, stuck, and stale, being upset that it's not the same way it used to be, to more fluid and more flexible and more nature-based. I've spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and so I want to say one thing about mentors is, let's not forget about nature being a mentor. You know, finding that time to take a hike or to go to the beach and watch the waves, and to really take that time away from the phone and away from those distractions, and to really tune in with what it is that you want to do and who it is that you are. And so my dream is to really help organizations and individuals find their highest vibration, their purposeful work in using nature as a mentor. So with organizations, I work with them to establish a common language about what the current reality is. And then we infuse some lessons from Mother Nature and understanding how flexible processes work. And so whether you're developing a strategy for operations or you're interested in social impact, nature has a lot to teach us about that. And then with with the individuals, there's a lot of lessons from Ayurveda and even biomimicry that we can start to use to kind of tune into. Let's just take something simple, like following the sun, like the cycles of the sun. If you look at the sunrise and sunset, those are really good cues for us to understand when to rise, eat, and sleep. So I'll leave you with a tip for that. Notice the way you wake up in the morning. Like, what is it that you do? Are you like completely looking at your phone and like completely getting a download of the news feed? As an alternative, try waking up and, checking out the sun and, making a cup of hot tea. Not coffee, but just a cup of hot tea. Just, that's a second cup, okay? Second cup. Yeah, and just giving yourself a chance to wake up, giving yourself your body, your digestive system some time to kind of ease into the day, and taking that time in the morning to really just appreciate, whether it's your yard or a view. And just do that for 5-10 minutes as a practice as you wake up. And that changes your day. Starts to change your day.
That's beautiful. And your dream is one to help us all become more well.
Yeah.
Which is
beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah, to tune back into nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, quickly just share with everyone how they can find you. If you all do, I do just want to say, if you all go to thechairtalks.com, all of the speakers' websites, social media handles are all there. But if you want to give just a quick shout out or something that you want to announce really quickly, feel free to do that really fast.
Sure. You can find us at elevatemybrand.com. We are actually offering everyone listening in a 30-minute session with us on digital marketing and production. So info@elevatemybrand.com, or of course you can find us on all the social channels.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Janique?
Well, my book's website is regroupnation.com. So that's the book info. The book is on Amazon. It's on Nook and wherever you can find books online and in some stores. So it's Regroup, the how-to of never giving up. The website is regroupnation.com. And I hope that people find inspiration there.
Thank you. Rachel?
Awesome. Well, yes, you can find us at ladyrebranded.com. Our social media handle is at Lady Rebranded, and mine personally is at Miss MS Rachel D. And we're just really excited about connecting with your audience. And so we'll be offering 2 slots to a mastermind coaching class that we have for women who have brands, businesses. And we'll be offering that to them as well. But be sure to follow us and send us a message at yes@ladyrebranded.com.
Excellent.
And you can find me at followthesunflow.com. And I am providing a complimentary 30-minute consultation to an organization or an individual that's looking for some nature guidance. So
That's excellent. And for those of you who feel stuck and want to move through any obstacle that you're going through, either personally or professionally, I am extending a 30-minute coaching session to help you figure out what your passion is, or maybe commit to tapping into your wonderful gifts. As we wrap up, I want to just throw out a couple of things to think about, is that, pursuing your passion does not have to be a job. It can be family, it can be community, it can be your health. But whatever it is, commit to it, right? Also, it can be looking at being more vulnerable. I think Brene Brown does a really good job of that. She's a researcher and storyteller, and if you haven't heard her TED Talk, it's transformational. I really appreciate all of you for being so vulnerable and so candid, sharing your wonderful stories with us. One of the things that I took away is how important it is to have a squad, and I feel so blessed to consider all of you a part of my squad. And, you might think that, wow, you ladies have it all together. Some of you are college educated or master's degrees, Ivy League schools. What about me, where I come from? And I can say that, as somebody who, again, grew up in a single parent household, I too lost my mom a few years ago. Didn't meet my dad until I was 20. I went through the community college system, got my associate's degree, and then transferred into Loyola Marymount University. Money is not an obstacle, or the lack thereof. Where you come from is not an obstacle. And I really like to say that the only obstacle is you. Right? There are certain circumstances we all know, depending on where we are in the world, that can hold us back. But the 3 things I've discovered that we have control over, the only 3 things are our thoughts, our words, our actions. So I think we should all be mindful of how we use them. So as we close, again, follow us at The Chair Talks on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also download and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play. And I also wanted to just talk about one last thing. If you're wanting to know what we're going to be talking about next, on August 22nd, I'm going to be talking to more amazing women. Save the date, because I will be having a conversation with the executive producers and showrunners Erica Shelton Kodish from Being Mary Jane and The Good Wife. I think Being Mary Jane is probably on right now, the season premiere. No spoilers. And also Erica Green Swafford of The Mentalist and How to Get Away with Murder. And we're going to be talking about being real-life power women, creating powerful women on television. If you all send in an RSVP to thechairtalks.com, you'll be entered, you'll basically get an invitation for a pre-sale for tickets, which will go on sale on the 24th for $15. After August 1st, they'll go up to $25 and $30 at the door. So definitely make sure that you get in for that because it's going to be a live event. So we're going to take the chair really live and in person. And I hope to see you all there on the 22nd of August. And I hope that you will share what you've heard today with other people on your timelines. Continue to follow us and also tell us about your journeys. Maybe you have a journey of courage that you'd like to share. If so, post it on the wall and maybe share a little inspiration with someone who's following us as well. Take care and see you again soon.